sorry. Um, James, will you tell a little bit about your Nicholas?
Sure. Nicholas was diagnosed about a year and a half ago with leukemia. He has a rather rare variant of it, but his treatment is going very well, and he's just started going back to school one to 3 days a week part time.
Mhm. And are we, Bobby and Vanessa, can you guys hear us? You could type in a little bit about Orion. Um, and I'll go back to James for a second. James, why did you decide that I should come to the school to do the in-service for Nicholas?
Navigating his care is extremely difficult. It's one of those things that you everything changes in an instant. It everything right there that day in that moment, everything changes. And the one thing that you don't really think about is school. And I've told this story before, but I'm going to say it again. Amy's heard it. We're sitting in the hospital, scared to death, trying to figure out his treatment, and then in walks Amy, and she says, "Hey, I'm here to help with Ask." And what is Ask? What I don't even know what that means. And she says, "Well, I'm here to help you navigate school." It just took all the pressure off. She says, "I can help you with homework. I can help you with getting a homebound teacher. I can help you transition back into school." And it was a gift. It's like this angel walking in the door to help you navigate the one thing. It's very important, but the one thing that you don't even think about is school.
Yeah. Did we get anything from Vanessa and Bobby, Susan,
Don't
about
see
this?
anything. I think they're
Okay,
having some technical problems. So,
so
they
I
popped up.
can say this about their son. So they had worked with the child life specialist at Carillion for a long time, wanting to do an in-service for their son Orion's class. And the school was very kind of back and forth. They never really were all in. And then when I started and then contacted them from my my new role, and I kind of wrote out a lesson plan as a teacher, I was able to do that and send them that lesson plan, and then it made them feel a lot more comfortable. So Carly, our child life specialist, and myself went to Orion school. So he really wanted to tell his story. He was kind of in a different place than Nicholas at the time. So, and they may be able to tell you that. But that was kind of what prompted them having us come to his school. So
Okay, now we need the video.
we can hear you, Bobby.
Hey, all right. So we had to switch machines.
That's okay.
There.
Yay.
Yes, yay.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce you guys. So to everyone that's watching, this is Bobby and Vanessa Moses, and they also have a son that's an Ask kid. So would you guys tell us just a little bit about Orion and how it came to be that Carly and I went to the classroom to do the in-service?
Yeah, so December 4th of 2020, we got the news that Orion had T-cell ALL leukemia. And as the gentleman before us, I'm sorry, I did not catch his name. He was sharing, it was like a ton of bricks and a tornado hit our entire world. And we didn't know what to do. 3.5 years of treatment sounded like an eternity. And then, we met the child life specialists. Miss Carly became one of Orion's favorite people on earth. And then Amy came into our lives, and it somehow, along with the team, it absolutely made it feel like we are not alone. We have a team of people that can help us navigate this, and we can actually focus a little bit more on being a family and not having to figure out how we're going to do this all by ourselves.
I don't know if you heard me say earlier, Bobby, I know with Orion, he wanted to tell his class the story.
Yes, he
And that
did.
was kind of what brought that brought me into his classroom, So he
Yeah.
was very excited.
He was very eager to tell his story.
And say again, the ages, Orion is how old?
So he is 8 now, about 8.5, and he was 5.5 or 5 when he was diagnosed.
Okay, and Nicholas?
He's 9. He
9.
was 8 when he was diagnosed.
Okay.
They're
Um,
very close in age. We've got to
Yeah.
get them together sometime.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Amy, once parents express that they're interested in having you come to their child's class and provide an in-service, what do those first conversations with the parents and with the school look like?
Okay, I'm going to share my screen here so I can use my slides too. Okay, give me just a second.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so kind of what happens, I'm going to go a little bit out of order here. So basically, once the family says that they're interested in having me come in, I, of course, have to contact the school and set up a time. I kind of was saying before, you know, with Orion's class in particular, the administration wanted to kind of see a lesson plan. So I sent, you know, I send the school kind of an outline of what we talk about. I tell them that I'll provide materials also to support, you know, questions that might be answered and things like that. The kids will be able to take things home. I explain all of that in an email. I usually talk with the patient about how comfortable they are wanting to share. In these two young men's story, Nicholas was kind of like, I might jump in, I might not, you know, he was a little more hesitant. And then Orion wanted to tell. And some kids feel differently. I've done in-services before where the student only sat as a listener, but I like to know ahead of time how much they want to participate. So we talk about that. I usually ahead of time try to show the patient the slideshow presentation and kind of discuss what I'm going to talk about so there aren't any surprises. Some kids want me to add pictures of their journey, particular pictures from when they were in the hospital. And then I usually send a teacher a copy of the finalized everything, and I make sure that the class, the teachers, the staff have a letter that they can send home that allows families the opportunity to opt out, since some families do feel like it's a very difficult topic and they may or may not feel comfortable, you know, for their child hearing a lesson about childhood cancer.
So I know in-services can look a little different for elementary age, but we also do them for middle and high school. So can you talk about what those differences are?
Absolutely. So this is kind of a elementary outline that I've used. I usually, you know, do an introduction, talk about who I am and why I'm there. And then we, you know, usually talk a little bit about different types of sicknesses and if kids have been to the doctor before. And then most of them all want to tell their stories at the time that they were sick or the time that they got a shot, you know. Then we talk a little bit about cells and why we have cells and what they do for our body. Then we go through a very brief, very child-friendly version of whichever specific type of cancer the child has. It differs, you know, if I do a lesson on a brain tumor, it's obviously going to be much different than one that I've given on leukemia or a rhabdomyosarcoma. So depending on the cancer, that kind of drives the lesson. Then we talk about the chemotherapy and some of the side effects. We talk about how to be a good friend and how to support their classmate. I give them a lot of opportunity for questions. And then we usually wrap up with a story or a video clip. Sometimes the story is kind of a feel-good story, and I'm going to show you one of the book covers here in a second. And then sometimes it's just a coloring book story that we leave for the class to color. For the older kids, there's a pretty powerful video about, it's from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society that talks about like, I'm just like you. And it's a lot of like older kids kind of talking and saying, you know, what they have, but what they still like to do and how they don't feel different than their classmates. With older kids, really, we kind of follow the same type of outline. They know a little bit more about cells at that point. You know, they have more background information because of science. So focus a little bit more on the cells, but really too, it's just a lot more opportunity for them to ask questions and talk about their feelings. Sometimes they will address questions directly to their classmate as well. So some of the in-services for older kids can be done in a really small group too, for just their friend group, which is what some of them would be more comfortable doing.
Sure. And I would think like, because they're changing classes in middle school and high school, it's not that you're going into every, every class. Would it be like homeroom or?
Yeah,
or
it could
for a friend
be,
group?
it could be homeroom, or we could do like a class meeting, like a small group meeting in a conference room, and they could just invite, who classmates that they want, to be part of. But yeah, I would think homeroom would definitely be kind of the branching out. But I think with the older kids, because we all know they do talk, if we give a group of them the information that they need, then they always are able to share it with other classmates. And then they end up kind of being an advocate for their classmate too, which is, powerful to have a classmate stand up for you. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
all right. So I'm going to kind of go through, this is the opt-out letter that goes home with families before I come. The teacher signs it, but it kind of gives a basic background about the student or the patient that's in the class, what type of cancer they have, and kind of when they were diagnosed and where they are in their journey. And then I kind of give an outline of what I'm going to talk about, introduce myself and what I'm going to talk about. And then it just, ask the parents to sign it, that they give their child permission to participate or not. As of now, every teacher that I've sent this to has used it, but some classrooms may decide not to. But I think it's nice for parents to have the option, like I said before. So this is the fun part. So this is kind of a breakdown of some of the presentation materials that we use. I do have the slideshow that I mentioned before that kind of guides the lesson, with some little kids, especially like preschool, kindergarten. We have a little doctor kit that we take, and we talk about even the tools, that the doctor uses. I have a puppet, and you can see that's Lisa, another navigator, with her puppet. I have Zoe, and Zoe, I know she's going to get blurry. Sorry. Zoe has a port in her. Let me see. I'm going to take you guys. Well, I don't know. You can see her, but she has a port, and she also has a flap in her belly that shows like her heart and her lungs and her liver and stomach. So we talk about, the different parts of the body, more so with the little kids than the big kids. Another cool thing about Zoe, let me show you this. Her hair comes off. So we can talk about the fact that her pointy head has no hair, and that it can grow back after treatment and things like that. So those are really good, especially with the little kids. I joke about needing to practice my ventriloquism. So I kind of use her more just as a doll. But the cool thing about her port is it is under her skin, and the kids can actually feel it to kind of understand that it's like a hard, kind of like a button that's under the skin. So, then we talk about that's how the child gets their medicine. And some kids like to, did a preschool in-service where the little kid wanted to show like the needle going into the tube, and I don't know all of the medical terms, but he kind of showed exactly how he gets his chemo. So to see a preschooler do that was pretty cute, and he had the like stethoscope around his neck while he was doing it. So that was super cute. So then I have, this is an example kind of the whole slideshow. This one was obviously for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I usually personalize it just to add a little, something for the child. I introduce myself. That's my cartoon, version, which kids usually get a kick out of. When the child life specialist is with me, we include her on there too. So we have her little cartoon and mine. We move on to kind of some predicting, and we have kids talk about what they think this is an image of. And lots of kids say bugs. And lots of kids say, we've heard kids say bubbles. Some of them are on point already and they say, oh, that's cells, but most of the time, germs. Lots of kids say germs. They think it's a picture of germs. So we kind of work through that. Then once we get to cells, we talk about the different types of cells and what they do, that it's their job to work our different organs, our muscles, our blood. And we talk about how they have different shapes because they have different jobs. With older kids, this is where I was saying we could go more in depth based on what they already know and maybe access some of their prior knowledge about what they already know about human cells. But I also sometimes use this slide and use Zoe the puppet to show her organs and talk about, this would be her liver. This is what her liver cells look like. Muscles, kids usually know, So we kind of give that little bit of that background. And then we talk about how we're going to focus on blood cells. So even though there's a lot of big words on this screen, we focus on the three kind of the main parts, the platelets, and then we talk about how they're kind of the Band-Aid, the little image shows him running with first aid supplies. He talks, they kind of help with the clotting and the scabs, and we talk about that. The red blood cells carry the oxygen through your body. And then we focus a lot on the white blood cells and their important job of fighting off the, fighting off the sicknesses and things like that. With the tumors, this slide looks more, it kind of shows what a solid tumor looks like, where they've all kind of clumped together in one, depending on where the tumor is. But if it's in a muscle, I show a different image that shows the healthy cells and the unhealthy cells too. Do you have any questions? I feel like I'm going really fast. Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hold on. Just kidding. I didn't mean to do that. All right. So after we talk about the blood cells, I show this screen, which again is different based on different types of cancer, but I usually use a graphic that's very cartoon-like rather than realistic. Of course, again, with big kids, it could be a very, an image from a microscope. But it shows a picture of the normal blood and a picture of kind of what it looks like when your blood is not healthy. The kids are usually kind of quick to point out what they notice about this screen. And we talk about kind of like the game, what is different? And they can tell that, the one picture shows the very unhealthy cells. And we also talk about what happens, if the red blood cells, if their job is to carry the oxygen, what would happen if they can't do that? So they make kind of some predictions and things about that. I usually include some little videos based on specific, cancers or things. This is just a cartoon. There's a website called the Imaginary Friends Society that has amazing child-friendly videos that are very cartoony and kind of cute that talk about different issues. This particular one pretty much backs up exactly what the other slides were about the types of cells and their jobs and what happens when one of them's not functioning correctly. I recommend going to that website though and checking out some of those videos. After we watch that, we talk about the chemo, and again, keeping it very, very simple. It can make you sick, it can make your body hurt, it can make you feel tired. And then we talk about how actually the chemo is what makes your hair fall out, not the cancer. And that's usually like a what moment, because most kids think cancer makes your hair fall out, but that's not it's actually the medicine for the cancer, that makes your hair fall out. So we talk about that. I pull Zoe's wig off, and it's a good laugh at that point. The other fun fact that kids always respond to is a lot of times when the hair grows back, it comes in differently. So we talk about how kids with straight hair might have curls and kids with brown hair might have blonde. And, it just how they always think always think that's fascinating. During this, especially during this part of the presentation, this is when I've noticed that the kids really like to talk about, if the child is participating with me, this is when they really get excited to talk about some things that they have experienced. I'll let Vanessa and Bobby could maybe talk about this, how Orion was when he was telling his story about when he gets the medicines. Tell them that story of how cute that was.
Well, so he was just really excited to get up in front of the class and share his
Very excited.
experience, and talk about, how he gets this needle and his port and the medicine, and I can't remember everything he said.
Didn't he
but
like try to show everybody?
I feel like there was a kind of a humorous moment.
Yeah.
But he just really got into the presentation.
Right. I
And
think he took over for a while, didn't
I
he?
did not
He
expect
did.
that. I didn't foresee that happening, but I thought that was really cool
Yeah.
because it just really allows these kids an opportunity sneaking into the background.
He's sneaking in.
So it really allows these kids an opportunity to, not only express themselves, but, have their voice heard and in front of their peers. Such a big deal. Because, the kids have known, oh, he's at the doctor's, or he's not here for this, or where's Orion, and there's a whole education piece that goes with that. But to actually have adults get up, explain everything, it just makes it more real. And it also helps them know how to be a better friend, like you were mentioning, which is a big deal, I think.
I think we all know that kids love to talk about themselves and tell stories, and for these kids, it's
Sorry.
kind of something. It's something that
They're
they
both
can talk
redheads.
about.
Sorry, we have two redheads. So.
You're fine. They can talk about it, and it's something that no one else knows in their class. It's not like something that kids usually can jump in and say, me too. So it's a very
Right.
unique experience.
And they're not really given the opportunity to talk about it when they're in school. I mean, beyond maybe privately with like a guidance counselor or something. It's very hush, you're focused on school, you're doing your schoolwork, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing in class. And to be given that opportunity when clearly it's such a huge part of your life and has been for some time. I think it's cathartic, just to be able to have that time in front of your peers and your teachers.
Yeah.
Because the teachers are getting taught as well.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right? I mean, they're part of the lesson. They're listening to you. So
Right. Yeah.
that's pretty cool as well.
I always find that once we get to this point is when the kid really is like, wow, let me tell this part.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's definitely, what I've seen with every in-service so far. I'm going to kind of keep going through this. This is the handout I was telling you that we talk about how to be a better friend, and what you can do to support the classmate. So this is a two-sided flyer, and one side just has facts about childhood cancer. But this is the side that we usually, kids like to take turns reading, each section, and we talk about what each thing means. We talk about how just being yourself because your friend just wants to be normal. We talk about learning a little bit about what they're going through. And I kind of encourage them to go beyond what I shared, and I say, ask questions, talk to your parents. And I, mention that there's more of those imaginary friend videos, and they can always, look up other kid-friendly resources. We talked about how they can offer to help their classmate anyway, and we also talk about how you should do that anyway. If you see a friend that's sad, help them out. If you see a kid that needs help carrying something, help them out. We talk about including your friends, so making sure that they don't feel left out. But again, we talk about how important that is to do anyway. And then taking care of yourself. It's very important that you don't ignore your feelings. I talk about how if you're feeling scared or if any of this makes you nervous, it's important to talk to an adult or a guidance counselor or a teacher, somebody, about how you're feeling, and make sure that you stay healthy as well. So the kids like that piece too. So for the next slide, so this is a video that I use in particular for this one student because he wanted everybody to understand his feelings about returning to school. So I chose this video based on, that piece of his concern. With another student, I included a video about what an MRI is because in his, in service, we had talked more about that. So he kind of wanted this video to be based on, I can kind of personalize it. With Orion's, I didn't have these slides. I had presentation pictures of him during different times in his treatment. And we did that for Nicholas as well, pictures of him and Carly and pictures. So kind of, and we let kids talk about their journey, with their photos. Here is a picture, and I have the book, but I always send this to the teachers so that they can use it again. So I read this story at some of the in-services that's kind of important, kind of talks about how laughter is the best medicine and how even in sad times, it's important to keep hope and happiness and just be cheerful. Like I said, sometimes it's not this story. Sometimes it's a coloring book that talks about a little dragon. And I think I have a picture of that too. Yeah, this one. This is a story about the sea serpent. And this story actually goes through about a lumbar puncture and what that is and all of those kind of details about cancer. So we tried to personalize, I'd like to say, the presentation based on what the child wants to do, based on their type of cancer, based on the age, and kind of tailor it to meet everybody's, situation. Both of these guys had pictures of themselves in the presentation. So I didn't share one of those today, but that really involves the student if they get to talk about the pictures, of themselves and what they were having done that day in the hospital and things like that. Go ahead, Susan. Were you going to sorry?
So leading into this next slide, the questions asked by students, I would love to hear from James and Bobby and Vanessa about your thoughts and perspective on the in-service for your child and the engagement of their classmates, and if you were surprised by it or you felt when I read through some of these questions, I was like, man, these are some deep questions for elementary age kids. So I wanted your perspective as parents on that.
Yeah, I can tell you, Nicholas was very nervous to go back to school, but excited nervousness. He wanted his story told, but he needed Amy and Carly to do it for him. So he got up there and was able to join in a little bit. But the biggest part was educating his friends. He was so excited for them to hear about his journey and what he's been doing, because he was out of school for a year and a little more than a year actually. And his kids, like you guys said earlier, they knew he was at the hospital or they knew he was sick, but they didn't know why. And so it was interesting to see them all listen to it carefully, and they did start asking questions about his port and oh, what kind of medicine are you taking, and do you get to come back to school full time, because he's still not back to school full time. So it was very interesting on how in depth the kids went with Nicholas on his journey, and he was very nervous to go back, but it's funny, he's as excited as he is every day that he gets a chance to go, which, before cancer was not always the case. So now he's excited any chance he gets to go to school. But it was invaluable, the lesson that Amy and Carly gave, because the kids got to understand a whole lot more on why Nicholas hasn't been there and what he's gone through.
So was the in-service for Nicholas right when he went back? Was it his introduction back?
It was shortly after. Amy did a fantastic job of getting him a very flexible schedule with the school. So he's got homebound, and then he can go one, 2, or 3 days a week, whatever he can stand at this point, because he's still gets very tired very quickly. So she did a great job on that, but he had just started going back 1 day a week, and then it was shortly thereafter that Amy came in and gave her presentation, and it really meant a lot to Nicholas because he was nervous. He was still growing his hair back and still not feeling well from the medicine, but he needed to get back into the school and get that socializing aspect of it and learning. That's important too.
It
I
is.
think at that point with Nicholas, he had only maybe been just to like the class party or
Yeah.
something like that for fall or Christmas party. I don't remember exactly.
It
when
was-
oh,
it
it
was-
was before Christmas. So.
Yeah, it was just that. Yeah.
Mhm.
James and Vanessa, were you surprised at all by like classmates' questions, kind of their elementary age perspective?
I was a little bit surprised. So when Amy and Carly came to do Orion's presentation, it was actually Orion's first time back in public school. And so it was
Well,
his
not that day.
no, but that was his first experience being in the public school. And then on top of that, even though he looked like a normal kid because his hair had grown
His hair had
back,
grown
he
back.
had his energy back. He wasn't at the doctor quite as often.
Still was
But
wearing a mask. So.
there were still questions like, how come Orion gets to go to the bathroom more often, and how come he gets to have extra snacks and all these different things. And he was very excited to be able to finally explain to his whole class what he'd been going through. He was extremely excited to introduce Miss Carly and Miss Amy, his grown-up friends. But I think, the kids asked some really good questions, but they were excellent listeners. I think they were just ready to hear everything you guys were saying.
Mhm.
There was some good participation at the end, but I think they were
mean-
just soaking it all up.
That
Yeah.
was first grade.
Mhm.
So, with first graders, I mean, bless their hearts, but they don't their perspective is rather limited. So what's phenomenal is, Orion's perspective being so much broader on the whole situation and him being able to express that to the class. I mean, nobody wishes for that to happen, but at the same time, to see the level of maturity, which anyhow, it's been kind of really wild to watch him shift.
I think
They-
it helped him with a lot of emotions
Yeah, and I
that
mean,
he couldn't really deal with.
it's just a wonderful opportunity for him. At least he felt he had the confidence to kind of say a few things. I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, he could have just, but I think he just got really excited by the presentation. And at one point he was pointing to the pictures and this is when this happened, So, but the first graders only have so much knowledge, but I still think, like Bobby was saying, it's just so helpful for them to at least have this little window of an understanding of to what he's been going through, and to feel okay about asking questions.
Yeah.
Because like we mentioned, his hair had grown back, but let's say it hadn't, right? Like, what a great opportunity for us to just kind of talk about this as a group, and not feel weird about it. And it's okay to talk about this.
Mhm.
So that's really awesome with these presentations, that we're letting all those children have that opportunity.
Yeah, they seem to be extremely interested.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a good point that, like not everybody's hair even falls out. His hair had grown
Mhm.
back, but it's like kids go back to school sometimes and they look okay, like to their classmates and teachers. They look okay, they look healthy, but there could be a lot going on there that that you can't see.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that.
I think the level of questions too is just so it's such a testament to their ages, because like you guys said, that lesson was first grade, and a lot of questions start with one time and we kind of have to redirect them. And then with the third grade class that I did Nicola's presentation, they were like, or I think one little girl asked, when does he get to come back, or why isn't he back full time yet? So we talked about how if you're training for a marathon, you would run a little bit each day until you built up your strength. And, she kind of understood that we were saying we're building him up. The questions that you see on your screen were asked by a fifth grade class. And I was blown away by some of these questions too. And it was so interesting because the staff had said all of the kids' hands were up and they were thinking, oh gosh, what's going to happen? And then they were the best set of questions. So I kind of want to go through these if we still have time, Susan, and just kind of give my quick answer.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right. So one of the questions was, how does someone get cancer? And with this one, we kind of just talked about how with children, there's not really a known cause, unlike some adults where your behaviors and your actions could maybe lead to causing cancer, smoking and things like that. But with kids, we don't know. And that's part of what the research is being, focused on. They're doing some genetic testing and things like that to see if things are hereditary. But overall, for childhood cancer, there's not a known reason for why someone gets it. What causes it? Like I said, that one kind of goes together. Again, we talk about how we don't know. How old do you have to be to get cancer? I thought that was a great question. And I explained that some children are born already with cancer. We have a patient now at the clinic that was diagnosed still in her mommy's belly, so the kids were like, and it's interesting that they realize there's not an age, I'm thinking that this little girl that asked this was thinking, when I turn 10, does that mean I'll get cancer? It was like she was processing if there's an age related to it. One student asked about if there was any other medicine besides chemotherapy, because she said, if chemotherapy makes you so sick, why is that what we're using? And so I had to kind of wing it on that one because that was a big science question. But I did talk about how there are some other things being explored now. And I kind of gave them the idea about like how they're using the CAR T cells and they're training them, to fight the cancer and all of that. They were excited to hear that there was research being done to maybe provide something that has less side effects. So I thought that was a great question. Why is it called cancer? I loved this question because it gave me the opportunity to say, I don't know meaning of the word and why. And I said, that is a great question. And it's one that we should look up because we don't know all the answers. And that was kind of I said, I'd love for you to let me know if you find the answer to that one, if there's a cancer doctor here, why do some kids go to another hospital? So that one was asked in particular because this student was actually being treated in Cincinnati instead of here in Roanoke. And I said, great question. Doctors have specialties, just like teachers have specialties, or police officers have specialties. So we kind of talk about how, a doctor's specific skills might have him working in a different city, and how different types of cancer have different types of specialists, so that was just where his particular cancer specialist was. Do kids survive more than adults? We did talk about that. I gave them the percentage of how many kids survive. And it was a group of fifth graders. So they understood that almost 90% was a pretty big number, that most childhood cancer patients survive at this point. And we talked about too, how adults get very specific, like organ related cancers a lot, and how that's different than the type of cancers that children get. And then how do you know if you have cancer? And this is a great one because that's one where I can turn it over to the student a lot of times. And I know Nicholas likes to tell about, he didn't feel good and he was weak and he was tired and he didn't want to eat you know, so that's a great, and that question varies, you know, depending on the type of cancer also. So a lot of these questions and others are directed to me, but a lot of times they're directed straight to the child too. And then I kind of let them answer and then, you know, add or guide them through answering the question.
And
Right.
then what
Oh, go ahead.
kind of follow-up goes out to, so if you are a parent of a classmate, like what information do you get to be able to speak with your child at home?
So this is a kind of it's an outline of a letter that I usually send home after I'm finished with the lesson. And it's very similar to the opt-out letter. In the beginning, it just talks about, you know, hey, today your child was part of a lesson that was about blah, blah, blah type of cancer. And then I kind of, you know, in that second paragraph there, it kind of explains that we talk about how cancer is not contagious. We talk about how if somebody wants to just be treated like everybody, you know, they just want to be treated like everybody else. Normalcy is important, that kind of thing. And then I do give the parents kind of in this middle section, like a kind of my kid friendly version of what we referred, you know, the vocabulary that was used during the lesson. So that if they get home and they start talking about something and they can't remember exactly what it was, then the parents kind of have an idea of what vocabulary was used so that they understand that piece. I explained that I, you know, had a puppet that has a portacath and that we talked about how the child gets their medicine. And then basically at the end, I share my contact information and just say, you know, wow, if you have, if your child has questions and you would like help answering them, you know, feel free to reach out to me. And I can provide more resources, basically child-friendly books or other websites or videos that could back up, you know, what they are, what they're concerned about, what their questions are.
I would love to hear from our parents what you felt like the benefits were. You've talked about that a little bit, I think already, but what the benefits of the in-service were for your child, but also if you heard any feedback from classmates, parents about the experience.
I can tell you the in-service to me was it was just so valuable for Nicholas because he, as we talked about earlier, he was nervous and nervously excited to go back to school, and just knowing that Amy and Carly were going to show up there to educate his friends on his journey meant everything to him. And I didn't hear back from any parents specifically, but the teacher we did hear back from, and she said that the kids, they talked about it even more. And of course, Nicholas, when he went back to school, I think a week or so later, when he went back to school, he was telling us how his friends, they talked to him about it and they understood because he can't participate in PE or when they go outside and play in the playground, he can't play. And he's still, you know, he's still taking medicine. He's still doing chemo treatments. So his maintenance is not easy, as we've come to find out, right, Amy?
Right.
Yeah. So, but he still gets to go to school. But the kids were excited that they knew now. You know, they understood why Nicholas doesn't stay for lunch because lunch is too loud and too busy. So they understood that a little bit more because of what Amy explained to them.
I don't think we heard back from any particular parents.
Well, to be honest, we're not really connected in that way with the members of his class, if you will.
Yeah.
We got a lot of feedback from the teachers, really good feedback. I believe the news was there. I'm sorry. That was like wild. It was kind of a wild day. So that was kind of wild and neat to, you know, also you all got interviewed about that. So that information was brought out to the community even more. And I was just happy to be there to support everyone. And I think there's like something that came to my mind a minute ago is I think there's a lot of like this sort of fear factor about educating, especially young children, about cancer, because just the word, or even slightly older, because everybody has a different relationship with that word. Some have no relationship with that word, right? Others, something very specific could be connected to an adult, right? And so I think that's another reason this is so valuable, is it's helping to distill some of that fear, and let's talk about this, let's get it out in the open. So, there's not a bunch of misconceptions here about this. Obviously, child-friendly language, we're not going to say misconceptions, but so I think that's another part of this that is so wonderful. And we really underestimate, at least myself, I really underestimated how resilient Orion was going to be throughout all of this. Yet there was definitely some hard times, but he's just so resilient. And when he got up there in front of his class, and it just really brought that home to me, that he could get up there with pride and talk about something that was very difficult to talk about. And through his own lens, he sees it this way, we see it, we see it a different way. So that was really beautiful to be able to see that resiliency like in action. And
Yeah.
yeah.
It absolutely helped his confidence. I think same as with Nicholas, he wanted to share, but he was nervous and didn't really know exactly how to go about it. And the structure of the presentation and having you guys there, he just opened right up, and
Yeah,
it became a little bit of a ringmaster in a way. but then afterwards, his friends were coming up to him and asking questions, and they were just all talking about it. It was great.
Mhm.
I think, Vanessa, you make a really important point, and it's I'm going to say a word that we hardly ever actually say, because I think things have changed so much in like the last 30 years. But there used to be a lot of stigma around cancer, and we don't really talk about stigma very much anymore, but I think that there certainly probably still is, a lot of fear around cancer, and that creates stigma. And so it's a really beautiful point that in bringing it out into the light and talking about it in the classroom kind of dispels that stigma.
I mean, even for the teachers, right? Like, because even for the teachers, they often don't know how to talk to Orion about it, or to, nonetheless the other kids. So I just think that whole educational piece is something any teacher or staff member there is going to be able to relate to, and then use that to continue to educate or inform or talk. If a child has more questions, or even is upset by something, like, okay, well, how do we talk about this in that kid-friendly way and not just brush it under the carpet? Like, we can talk about this, it's okay.
Yeah, I think it really helps start that conversation, so that when the child is having a bad day, or with some of these kids, some of the medications, it makes them extra emotional. I think it helps make it feel okay for the teacher to talk about it, tell the class about it. Orion needs a little extra,
He needs a break. He
Right.
needs a little time, just to himself.
Yeah.
Or whatever. He needs a snack. He's on, not that we're going to say he's on a steroid week, but
Right.
he needs to go to the nurse's office to get a snack or whatever. Why does he get all these snacks? Because he's taking medication that makes him hungry.
Right.
I definitely think the teachers feel a sense of relief after the lesson. I would say that across the board. It's just they kind of learn a way to, address things and understand that it is okay. So I would agree with you know, I think the teacher just feels better if somebody else does it, and then they kind of know
Right.
how to broach those questions.
We have just a few minutes left. Are there any participant questions or comments? You can either raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type them into the chat or the Q&A. Just a second. While we wait to see if anybody's going to type in, Amy, do you want to go to your next
Yeah.
slide?
So we got a picture there of Nicholas with his port showing a classmate. So the benefits of doing this, and the Moses and James Paquitas have already said almost all of this. The reason that we do this is because it gives some child-friendly information about specific cancers. It does help, you know, children to be less worried, less curious, less afraid. It gives them an opportunity to ask with somebody who's comfortable answering the questions, you know, there. It does teach empathy. The kids always want to share, you know, a time they were sick, or a time they got a shot, or a time. So it does, they are able to kind of see, wow, you know, I know what it's like to be sick, but I also feel, you know, like I want to help Nicholas or help the student. Offer suggestions. You know, we talk about how to be a good friend, and that just leads to really being how to be a good human. It does give this child such a sense of an empowerment, like the Moses just explained about Orion. You know, it really gave him the stage. And as the lesson went on with Nicholas, he continued to kind of come more and more out of his shell. And then what we talk about with survivorship a lot is the kids needing to be able to advocate for themselves. And as they get older and they go through their survivorship journey, just being aware of what type of cancer they have and how to, you know, express themselves and explain, you know, any kind of issues or late effects or anything like that they're having. So this gives the kids kind of the first chance, usually, to be, hey, here's my story. And it's very powerful. So we definitely, you know, there's more benefits to having the in-service than not, for sure. So here's a quote, and there's Orion telling his story up there. And you can see in the background in his, like I said, I mentioned in his presentation, we had a lot of pictures of his journey. So he was up, you know, talking about the different pictures and the different things. But this was a quote that I found that just kind of summed it up. And, you know, encouraging children to communicate with teachers and peers about their condition helps them feel empowered and prepared. And I think that prepared piece, the more I learn about survivorship and the issues that come after, you know, the diagnosis and all the treatment, I think it's so important that these kids are ready to speak up about their, you know, their health and things like that for the rest of their life, for the rest of their journey.
Yeah, that's definitely a piece, the being able to speak up for yourself and to, you know, what are my needs? What am I even feeling? You know, that it's hard for these kids. They have to learn how to do that. And, you know, we're obviously their support system. So we're teaching them how to do that. But I think this definitely is a great opportunity where they start to see, oh, I can do that. I can speak to my story or to my feelings. I don't have to just sit here and pretend to be normal, or that everything's quote unquote normal, whatever that means, right?
Right.
So it's like, because everything is so different for them. I mean, it may not be apparent, as you can see here, he has this full head of red hair, you know, like the only obvious difference at this point, although that's a port access shirt, because I think he had chemo that morning, but is that he was still wearing a mask in school.
Yeah.
And other kids weren't. Most of them weren't at that time. But even now, like right now, I've got him in a mask because it's just, sorry, mom paranoia, I guess. You know, like, so the class knows, you know, that's why Ryan's still wearing a mask, right? And it's not a big deal, and no one's picking on him for that, you know.
Yeah.
And even if they were, he would probably just stand up for himself and be like,
Yeah. Nothing to
"Good
be
idea,
ashamed of.
you know, I'm wearing a mask." Like, so so it's great that they can speak up for themselves.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just wanted to go through who our education support navigators are for anybody who is watching that is in a region outside of the Southwest. So Amy is our navigator that is in the clinic at Carilion Children's, but we have education navigators at each of the 5 pediatric cancer treatment centers in Virginia. So if you have found this and are watching later and you have a child who is treated at one of these hospitals, then you have access to this education support navigator. So Lisa Mears is at Inova Char Cancer Institute in Fairfax. John Longenecker is at Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU. Amy is at Carilion Children's. Grant Pavlik is at Children's Hospital of the King's Daughters in Norfolk. And then Lauren, we need to update this. She recently changed her name to COSAR, back to her maiden name. So UVA Children's Hospital in Charlottesville. So they all can do class N services. If you're watching this and you have a child who is treated at a different treatment center, not one of these 5, and you don't have an education support navigator at your treatment center, a lot of times a child life specialist can go into the classroom. I know at Carilion Children's, Carly goes in with Amy and they do joint in services, which is fantastic. So that's another option if you are outside of Virginia and you were looking for this sort of support. So we're gonna wrap up, and I'd like to say thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you so much to James, Bobby, and Vanessa for sharing your experiences. Your perspective is invaluable and so helpful, I'm sure, for other parents who are considering an in-service or didn't even know it was an option and now know that that's something that they can ask for their children or child. Thank you to Amy for sharing your expertise with us this evening. This will be our last webinar for 2024. All of the recordings can be accessed on the Ask website, which is askccf.org. Go to resources and then the webinar series. So we hope that everybody leaves this evening feeling like they have a better understanding of what a class in service can look like and the benefit to their child and their classmates as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.